At the edge of Louisiana, where the land and water meet, is a garden made not of flowers and bushes, but of concrete and stone. This week, we're visiting the Chauvin Sculpture Garden, a place where the only thing more mysterious than its creation is its creator. Unique, mysterious, untamed. These are just a few words that describe Louisiana's Atchafalaya Basin. I'm Caroline Byrne, Assistant Director for the Atchafalaya National Heritage Area. Join me on an adventure through the wild and rich culture and landscape of the Atchafalaya, America's foreign country. America's Foreign Country is produced by the Atchafalaya National Heritage Area with support from the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, the Office of the Lieutenant Governor, and the Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism. The mission of the Atchafalaya National Heritage Area is to preserve and promote the Atchafalaya's unique heritage by fostering progress for local champions that create authentic, powerful connections between people, culture, and the environment. This is America's Foreign Country. Head south on LA1 and you'll hit Thibodaux, Louisiana, home of the Nicholls State University Kernels and delicious Cajun cuisine. 45 minutes southeast of that is the little town of Chauvin, Louisiana, population somewhere around 3,000 people. If Chauvin sounds familiar to you, it's likely because of the impact Hurricane Ida had on the area. But this town of strength and resilience has so much more to share. At what to any newcomer would seem like the edge of the world is a garden made not of manicured landscapes, but of concrete and stone. The mystery surrounding the Chauvin Sculpture Garden starts with the artist himself, Kenny Hill. To tell Kenny's story, I asked for help from Chauvin expert Gary Lafleur.
Dr. Gary Lafleur. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Bayou Studies, and I am also the President of the Friends of the Chauvin Sculpture Garden. I was born and raised in Eunice, Louisiana, and was kind of educated in the wetlands of Louisiana by my father by going hunting and fishing around Bayou Lacassine, which is still sort of wild. And even though I studied biology in college, it ended up that I could tell after a while, after getting a master's and a PhD in biology, that still some of the first best lessons I had learned came from those early lessons from family members like my dad and my cousins as we were hunting and fishing. So I got my master's in Port Aransas, Texas at the University of Texas Marine Science Institute. Got my PhD in Florida at another marine lab called the Whitney Marine Lab, and then did a postdoc up in Brown in Rhode Island. So that means after leaving Louisiana, I was away from the state for about 15 years, looking at other coasts and still appreciating Louisiana, not necessarily knowing how I could get back. But then I was real happy to see a job position opened up at Nicholls State University in 1998. So since 1998, I've been teaching physiology and developmental biology at Nicholls State. Chauvin is special to me, and some of it is just a gut feeling, but since I'm an academic, I can't help but think about it in some academic way. So sometimes I feel like it's my job to introduce students at Nicholls to what's special about our coast. So since that's my job, I look at it and try to do it in an organized way. So if you look at a map of what lies below Houma, there's 5 big bayous, kind of like 5 fingers. And to me, that right there is just an awesome excuse for spending weekends exploring. You got 5 different bayous. So like I was saying, almost from an academic point of view, all these 5 bayous right underneath Houma, they're all kind of similar, but kind of different. And so scientists like comparing and contrasting like that. They're kind of similar because they all have a different bayou. They all have fishing. They have marinas. They all have little grocery stores. They all have little schools. And so there's a lot there to compare. And if you think about how that comparison works, it's like a cross-sectional comparison. To me, it's interesting, the difference between Dularge and Chauvin and Pointe-à-Chien. But then what's cool about Chauvin, if you can only hit one of these bayous on one weekend and that's all you have, Chauvin offers a cool longitudinal comparison, almost from an academic point of view. Not cross-sectional, but longitudinal, because you can start what people would call up the bayou, and you can follow it all the way down the bayou. And right before your eyes, in an hour-long sort of trip, you see, oh, yeah, this is different. Mm-hmm. Up the bayou is the big city of Houma with a downtown and beautiful cathedral. And you get closer to Chauvin, you see smaller houses, and you see every house has a boat behind it. Sometimes the shrimp boats seem to be more of the focus of the family than their house. And then in Chauvin, you still see a community that really depends on fishing. And you see kind of like the three groups of fishermen. You see shrimpers, crabbers, and oyster families. You know, I have like about 100 things that I like, but I kind of understand, like, on a one-day trip, you got to give people the priorities. So this is a good priority list. If you're headed down to Chauvin, you can stop at the Chauvin Sculpture Garden. That usually surprises people because it's a masterpiece, kind of a hidden masterpiece. And in some ways, we want everyone to know about it, but on the other hand, having it a slight mystery is also sort of one of the special things about it. So it remains a mystery, and it's a good first stop. It's right in downtown Chauvin. You're close to the Piggly Wiggly if you need some groceries or something like that. And then I send people south, and you cross over Boudreaux Canal into the village of Cocodrie. And in Cocodrie, there's several grocery stores that are good stops. But one thing that you can do is you can take this very unique road called Bayou Salé Road. So if you spell that, it's S-A-L-E, which is like French for kind of, it's not Sally, a girl's name, it's Salé for like salty bayou, like salinity bayou. So you take Bayou Salé Road, and that leads you to Dulac. But Dulac is not the most important part. It's the road itself that's important. Because when you take this road, it leads you from Cecil LaPerouse's grocery into saltwater marsh. And after a while, there's no telephone poles anymore. And it looks like the road is not following any obvious line. It curves, as big curves. And it kind of seems kind of mysterious. And some people think that road is haunted. But there's some little places where you can stop on that road and you feel like you're in a sea of grass on that road. Some of the grass that goes over your head, and if you're accustomed to being in town where grass only goes up to your ankles, you get out there where the grass goes over your head, and to me, that's a pretty special place. But it's a nuanced trip because you have to take the stop and you have to maybe go slow and maybe pull out some cheese or your favorite refreshment just to hear the sound of nothing out there. That, to me, that's how you get the most of that Bayou Salé Road. And then if you want to keep going, then you go to the town of Dulac, which gives you a nice town to compare to Chauvin. But in Dulac, you can eat at a down the bayou restaurant called Sienna's. It starts with a C, so it doesn't exactly look like the same way that you would spell it, but it's C-E-A-N-A-S, Sienna's, and it's right on this next bayou, which is Bayou Grand Caille. And, it's just a local restaurant up on stilts. They cook great seafood there, and it's family owned, and so it's the real deal. So that's one way to see Chauvin.
At what to any newcomer would seem like the edge of the world is a garden made not of manicured landscapes, but of concrete and stone. The mystery surrounding the Chauvin Sculpture Garden starts with the artist himself, Kenny Hill. Not much is known about Kenny Hill. We do know that he was a bricklayer born around 1950 in Springfield, Illinois. He arrived in Chauvin around the 1980s looking for construction work, and a local landowner allowed him to pitch a tent on a small plot of land near Bayou Petit Caillou. In the 1990s, with no warning or explanation, Hill began to transform the land into a world seen only through his eyes. As the garden stands today, even in the face of natural disasters, there are more than 100 concrete sculptures packed tightly into the area. Bright colors, biblical references, and a diverse array of figures guided by seemingly weightless angels give some insight into the artist's emotion at the time. Kenny also places himself in several scenes in the garden. His long blonde hair and beard can be seen riding a horse, carrying Christ's cross, and holding a bleeding heart. Situated prominently at the back of the garden is a 45-foot lighthouse made of 7,000 bricks. Figures include cowboys, soldiers, angels, God, and Hill himself cling to the outside. Kenny worked on his garden for over a decade. In 1999, Professor Dennis Saporsky, who was the former chair of the art department at Nicholls State University, was photographing the site when he struck up a conversation with Kenny. He asked Kenny what his vision was for the garden, to which Kenny replied, "It's about living and life and everything I've learned." Dr. Lafleur has his own thoughts. I do want to talk a little bit about the gardens. I don't want to talk too much because before I went, all I heard was, I can't tell you about it. You just have to go experience it. And then you're kind of saying the same thing. So what would be a draw for people to make that drive? What can you tell people about it?
Well, this is a place that's been recognized all around the world as a masterpiece of visionary art, is one way to describe it. You could also call it untrained art or folk art. It was made by one person, Kenny Hill, and he didn't get paid for it. He wasn't making the art on commission or anything. He seems to have been creating a garden that had a very personal message, but he didn't explain the message. And so the people that know Kenny, they've told me that, well, he didn't really express himself in words that much. But what's obvious is the way that he expressed himself was in this garden that he created. And one of the things that people like to look at there is the garden is full of angels. And they're not exactly like the typical angels that you would see in your children's Bible. They're related, but that's one of the things that makes the garden different is Kenny's vision of angels is kind of unique. So I think a lot of people see that first. Wow, look at all the angels. But for me, one of the other treats is that the garden is also full of self-portraits of Kenny. And I think they're connected to him. It's his way of communicating with the visitor. And like one way to think about it is, as a teacher, I kind of feel like this sometimes. You know, no one wants to be told what to do. Nobody wants to hear somebody's suggestions of how you should live your life exactly. But it seems like Kenny is trying to do this in a very humble way. Kind of like what I get from Kenny's face in his sculptures is, if you're asking me what to do with your life, I think I can point you in the right direction. And several of his sculptures are pointing. But that's about all he says. He doesn't really tell you exactly what to do, but I have a feeling that's some of what Kenny is trying to do, is almost give a suggestion of what's important in life, something like that.
In the time he lived on the property, Kenny repeatedly denied requests to promote his work. The work was for him, and as he puts it, was a story of salvation for the local residents of Chauvin. As mysteriously as Kenny appeared in the 1980s, he disappeared in the same manner in 2000. The landowner who allowed him to pitch a tent on the small piece of bayou-side land in the 1980s had passed away, and Kenny was eventually evicted from the property by the parish. Described by neighbors as being quiet and deeply troubled, Kenny abandoned his home, art, and religion without a trace. Professor Saporsky did not forget his meeting with Kenny and recognized the cultural importance of the garden, especially in the rural community of Chauvin. He contacted the Kohler Foundation in Wisconsin, which grants funds to preserve folk art and self-taught artists to provide a grant to purchase the land. The foundation agreed and granted $500,000 to purchase the land, build a visitor center, and make other improvements under the condition that someone would maintain the garden. The site was then donated to Nicholls State University, who in 2002 officially opened the Chauvin Sculpture Garden to the public and dedicated the building across the street as the Nicholls State University Art Studio. Today, student art hangs alongside pictures of Kinney Hill, a nod to the garden's past and its inspiration for the future. Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit about the Center for Bayou Studies. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The Center for Bayou Studies, the idea did not come from me exactly. It came from my colleagues, Dean John Doucet and Dr. Shauna Walton. They both serve on our board. But it took their wisdom to notice that, well, there's people all over Nicholls State University that are doing different types of work, but it has this common theme to it, and that is it's about life on the bayou. So an example of that is I have a colleague, Elise Ferrara, who studies alligator gar. And that makes sense. That's something that lives in the bayou. But to do that, she also collaborates with a local alligator gar fisherman, Ricky Verrett. So he has knowledge that's been passed down from United Home and Nation ancestors about where to fish for alligator gar, how to clean them, and how to cook them. And so most biologists in other parts of the country, they might study a fish, but all they do is just study where that fish is, and they look at it from a biological point of view. But in this case, Elise gets the biology of the fish that she knows, plus kind of like the culture of the fish that Ricky Verrett knows. And then Ricky's sister, Janie Luster, makes jewelry out of gar scales. And so then that's connected to another use of the alligator gar. And so that's an example of something that the Center for Bayou Studies is interested in nurturing. It's like it's not just the bayou. The bayou is the beginning. But we're interested in the cultures that have existed next to the bayou for hundreds of years. And we're doing that at Nicholls because there's other places that have beautiful wetlands, but they don't have as strong maybe or as isolated or as preserved an example of cultures right next to those wetlands. And it's kind of a counterintuitive, but what led to that was since the people of South Louisiana were so isolated, that's actually what leads to cultural preservation, right? So being out of the mainstream means that, well, you and your family tend to know one part of the marsh or the wetlands better than any other people, and you stay there. And so you could call that traditional ecological knowledge. And so this part of South Louisiana is very rich in that. And the Center for Bayou Studies sort of recognizes that is unique. So we want to preserve that. Another thing that we want to do is kind of act like a hub for other people that want to study that. So we like to raise awareness for that, but we also like to preserve it.
The Chauvin Sculpture Garden received a grant from the Atchafalaya National Heritage Area in 2021 for improvements related to accessibility of the garden and gallery.
I would say that I recognize the mission of the Atchafalaya National Heritage Area as being important, and I can tell that what has been preserved in the coastal areas of Terrebonne is a unique part of the ANHA. It's unique enough to where it needs to be integrated into one of the gems of the ANHA. And to me, this is sort of why I've seen coastal towns that were attractive, so attractive that people move to them and the town becomes unauthentic. Like an example is Rockport, Massachusetts. It's so attractive that a bunch of outsiders moved in and it's not really a fishing town anymore. on the other hand, Chauvin, where the Chauvin Sculpture Garden is still an example of a traditional fishing community that's still a hard-working fishing community. And instead of one big company owning all the boats, like I've seen in other coastal towns, where one company kind of buys out all the fishermen, in Chauvin, one family owns one boat. And I try to get students to the Chauvin Sculpture Garden first to see the art. What they're likely to see at the same time is a shrimping family leaving their house and going to the Gulf of Mexico. And on that shrimp boat, as it passes by, they're not doing it for the TV or not for any kind of show or on a script, but oftentimes you'll see the grandfather and the son and maybe the granddaughter all on one boat, and they're going out to work. And that's something that's becoming rare in the United States. Just that system of tradition that is connected to wetlands. So that's a good place to see it. You can just still see it in coastal Terrebonne, where it's getting harder and harder to see in other places. Okay, maybe another thing I would say is, although the core of the Atchafalaya National Heritage Area would seem to be the Atchafalaya Basin, we recognize that an important part of the Atchafalaya is it goes from up estuary down to the coast. So the Atchafalaya is an important part of the coast, and that's what Terrebonne offers, is a way to experience the coast that the Atchafalaya and its bigger sister, the Mississippi, it's the coast that these two rivers sort of created. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's sort of why this coastal town can be thought of as being connected to the Atchafalaya.
Are friends of the Chauvin Sculpture Garden on social media or as the Center for Bayou Studies? Is that something you would want to share?
If you go to Nicholls State University and search for Center for Bayou Studies, our website pops up. And the Chauvin Sculpture Garden has a Facebook page that's active. That's a good place to check to make sure that things are going well at the garden. And then people are afraid, since Hurricane Ida, that we're closed and stuff like that. But we still are. The garden is open every day from sunrise to sunset. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, we have artist docents there to give tours from 11 to 4 on every Saturday and Sunday.
Information for this episode came from Nicholls State University and myneworleans.com. Special thanks to Dr. Gary Lafleur. Our music is by Jordan Thibodeau at Le Rodaille with permission from Valcour Records. The National Heritage Area Program is a partnership with the National Park Service. NHAs are designated by Congress as areas that tell nationally significant stories through natural, cultural, and historic resources. Designated in 2006, the goal of the Atchafalaya National Heritage Area is to preserve and promote the natural, recreational, and cultural resources surrounding the Atchafalaya River and its basin. For more information about the Atchafalaya National Heritage Area, visit www.atchafalaya.org. That's www.atchafalaya.org. You can learn more about the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development at crt.state.la.us/cultural development. Support for this show comes from the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, the Office of the Lieutenant Governor, and the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism.